I wish I would have told my younger self, the world is a super big place.
Yeah.
Get out there, girl, and go explore it.
You know, you want to know if you can be with someone through the good times and when things get bad, and that they're not just going to run away and kick you to the side when things get bad, because life is hard. It's just hard for me to connect with people who don't understand the trauma that I've been through. It kind of makes me a red flag.
We're all meeting each other for the first time, and nobody has lived a perfectly, amazing life where nothing bad has happened.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Debbie.
I'm Caitlyn. Welcome to our new podcast, Dating at Her Age. Oh, she's dating at her age?
No. It's called Dating at Her Age. Oh, those poor things. Pull up a chair. Here's what we're going to talk about today, Caitlyn. We're going to talk about things we wish or should have told our younger self, like looking back on our dating life. I'm 57 years old. There's a lot of things this 57-year-old would have told my 21-year-old self, but I didn't know all the things because I hadn't been down the road of dating. So I've written down a list of several different things that I would tell my younger self if given the opportunity. And what really is the catalyst behind our discussion today is the stat that I saw from AOL Living, and they teamed up with Women's Day, one of my favorite magazines back in the day, and says that they do the survey, and they say 50% of the women that they talk to said their husband is not their soulmate, and that they sometimes regret marrying them. But I think there's a lot to this, because when we're young and we are looking for a life partner, there's a lot of things we tend to overlook because we're blinded by what we call rose-colored glasses. We see only the good. We don't look at the red flags, or we don't try to find somebody who's more compatible with us. So I thought this was just in looking at all of the women I know, I think this stat is spot on, and I think it's worth having a really deep, reflective discussion about. Yeah, and I mean, you may not realize that you're not with your soulmate until later on. Like maybe people got married young and they had the blinders on and all of that stuff, and you never really know until you get into it. Or maybe people have settled, and that's just unfortunate. But I can understand with all the pressures that could happen, that you just think that it's right for you when it's really not. I don't want to discount our ages here. Being 57 years old, almost 30 years older than you are, we've had a lot of different experiences in our dating life. And you're dating at a time when apps are the hot thing. I'm getting back into the dating game after divorce, where apps are the hot thing. I'm like, wait a minute. We used to date people we went to high school with back in the 80s, or people our friends knew, or the guy who grew up down the street. Now we date strangers. Now we date people we've never met. But what I'm saying is I don't want to discount your experiences being 29 because you look back on maybe your high school years or your early 20s. Are there a few things that stand out to you that you would want to tell your younger self if you had to do it over again? And I feel like I have phases of my younger self, because I'm just such a different person now at 29 than I was at 15, 16, and also when I was 25. Like not that long ago, my mindset has shifted a lot. But I mean, the first thing I can think of, like I always imagined like high school would be, I think I addressed this in the earlier episode, that I've always been kind of just an awkward, weird dater. Like it's never been comfortable for me. Like, so I was always kind of the one who was single, who didn't have dates to dances. And I was just, maybe it was because I was the weird girl, but I'm not like the weird girl, but I was socially awkward. And I know that I'm socially awkward. It wasn't easy for me to talk to boys. I'm not comfortable with it at all. And so I always just was like, okay, maybe in high school I'll start to move out of that. But I never really did. And I never really, even after high school, got super far past it either. But I don't know. I always thought I would eventually figure it out, and by like 23, 24, I'd probably end up being married. And now we're here at 29 and I'm happily single. But it's just your perspectives change and I've accepted that and I'm happy with it. But you always have this vision when you're younger that I was like, oh, when I'm in my 20s, I'll be married and start having kids, because that's what people do. But looking back, would you have told your younger self that that's just unrealistic? Yeah, and that's kind of where I was moving into that, is like, it's okay. It's okay if you don't have a date to a high school dance. It's okay if your
the one friend who's not, out with boys, which I talked to boys when I was in high school. I wasn't completely like it, but it was just not as frequent as all my other friends. It wasn't as natural to me, I guess. And so I just think that it's okay, and you'll actually thrive without somebody else. You may even do better just because you can put all of that energy into yourself and instead of another person, and it will just work. And eventually what is meant for you will come to you, but it does not have to be focused around a significant other, and you're not insignificant for not having it. So that's, I think, the biggest message for my younger self. Like, you're not lesser. And it's okay if you're socially awkward, embrace it. I've learned to embrace that. Like, I am very awkward in social settings. So I don't know. I'm still learning, but that's, just to high school me, please just accept your weirdness, and it's okay.
Because we work together, and we a couple of times we've attended events together through work, and I don't find you awkward at all.
I've gotten better. I will say that I've gotten better. It's different in a professional setting as well, because I feel like I'm thriving in that environment. But no, I like, comparison to my high school me, college me, I feel like I've just gotten a lot more out of my shell just in friend settings and whatnot. But if I'm closer to you and in a comfortable space, I will talk to you a lot more than I will if I'm like uncomfortable. But I've definitely grown, and it's probably because of my job and meeting people and stuff like that. You just learn to come out of your shell, but I focused on me doing that.
I think career or job is really key to that. I think, you picked a career path in journalism. You're a producer on the David Dujanovic show, which I host, and so we work really closely together. It forces you every single day to reach out to lawmakers, to reach out to, people back in D.C. to get them on the air, to moms and dads to get them on the air live, to voice their opinion about topics. Do you think that has helped you over the years?
100%. Yeah, I think just like going through college even, and just like learning that the world is so big and that you can go and do all of these things, and if you just try and shoot for things and talk to people and do that, I am much better now, but it took me a minute.
So let's camp for a minute on the world is so big theory that you just said. I think you grew up in a small town in Utah, and I grew up in the 70s and 80s where the world was much smaller, just because we didn't have social media, we didn't have the money that I think that we have now to travel. I did not realize that when I was a child and when I was even into high school and dating, that there are like billions of people in this world, and there's so many opportunities to get out of our space that we grew up in. That's one of the things I wish I would have told my younger self outside of dating is you can go anywhere now. And you've come a long way from Price, Utah to Salt Lake City. It's a 3-hour, 2.5 hours drive. Yeah. I came from Phoenix to Salt Lake City back in the 90s when I was 23 years old as a news reporter here. But I went from Phoenix to Yuma, where I was in a small town, Yuma, Arizona, for just a short time. And then I moved to Salt Lake City. And that was it. And it was right out of college that I started my career. And I kept my head down the whole time, and I've been working for 35 years. And I wish, like I said, even outside of relationships and dating, I wish I would have told my younger self, the world is a super big place. Get out there, girl, and go explore it.
And it's scary to do that.
I agree.
But it is. Like, and I've learned, like, because I did take the step to move out of Price, which many people do, some people don't. I think everyone is scared to do that. Obviously, I was scared.
But you can't control what everybody else is doing. So
you have the control of your own life if you want something more. And I moved because I knew that the job that I wanted to be happy in wasn't probably there for me, and I wanted to go to school. I always knew that I was going to leave. I just knew. I didn't know how long I would stay. I thought maybe I could go back, but now I'm like, okay, I've gone to Salt Lake, and I think I'm still here, and I like it here, and we're doing great things that keep me motivated every day. But, I'm like, well, New York's there, Europe's there. And sometimes it makes me nervous. I'm like, I am 30, something's going to settle me down eventually. But the world is big, and that's a good lesson to everybody. But you've done magnificent things. Just leaving Phoenix is a step.
It was a
step. Doing that is
it was a scary step. Believe it or not, even though it's only 642 miles away from Salt Lake City, it was a scary step for me. I was really young. I didn't have any money to move up here. I was in debt up to my eyeballs out of college. And I had never spent much time at all in Salt Lake City, even though it was pretty close to home. It still felt like a world away. But I think what it also does is it opens the door to meet unique men.
Yeah,
if you're dating men, or meeting other people and making other friends. And I feel like that maybe I have put myself in a little bit too much of a box by staying in one place in terms of the pool of men who are available.
Maybe. And I mean, you've got life ahead of after KSL that you can definitely leave. But I mean, maybe the men that we're talking to are just...
They're not here.
I just wonder if the men that work with us are also wondering the same thing. And they're just not out there because they're discouraged, like I'm discouraged.
Yeah, that's a great point.
But I don't know. I think that it's a very good point to step out of your comfort zone.
So when I look at this stat that says 50% of women say their husbands aren't their soulmate, and sometimes they regret marrying them, that just takes me back to, again, that issue of what I would have told my younger self. You would have told yourself, I'm okay. I am enough. I might have some awkward moments or things about me. By the way, Caitlyn, who doesn't?
No, I know.
Who doesn't?
And that's why I'm like, embrace it. It's all good.
Embrace it. It's okay. I would have told myself this about my relationships. Drop the cultural and parental pressure to get married. Yeah. I felt a very big weight on me. Some of that was self-induced. That was part of it, though, was external. A lot of my friends were getting married right out of high school, as yours did, and having children. And I was bound for college by design. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to become a journalist. So I went to Arizona State University, got my degree in journalism and my minors in political science. And then I went right into a job at a television station in Phoenix, Arizona. It was a huge job for a young 20-something-year-old who was way in over her head in the news business. But I learned so much so quickly because there was no room for error. And I was learning from the best. These people, I mean, Phoenix at the time was a top 20-ish news market, huge news market, lots of news happening, big news market as well. Very, very diverse. And so I learned a lot there. However, the whole time that I was going to college and after college, I felt this major cultural and family pressure to find a soulmate. And that's a lot. I was taking, I realize now that's a ton of pressure. I took a full year and a half. I went, I think, 2 years straight to ASU. I had to make up some credits that I'd lost during a transfer from the University of Arizona. So I ended up taking like 21, 24 credit hours, going to full-time summer school, working. I was at the campus radio station. I was in an internship at a local television station, which was considered an actual job. I got paid for that. And in the meantime, I'm trying to date a guy. And we'd been together for a couple of years. And then I went to work for the TV station and I met another guy, and the other relationship had been on the rocks for a while. I knew that we weren't going to be together forever. He was a few years older than me. We were just at different places in our lives. I was going to be looking for a job outside of Arizona, but a lot of information, but that gives you some background. I felt like I was so busy with one thing, but then I'm trying to tackle this other thing, and there was just not enough of me to go around and make great decisions. Yeah,
and I can relate to that a lot, and I think that that's a big part of, why I haven't, been in serious relationships, or it hasn't been at the top of my list for most of my 20s, because that 20s you're figuring it out, and 18 to 20s. I just think that everyone is on their own timeline, and some people, like us, choose the career school timeline directly after. And some people can manage dating in that timeline, then they meet their soulmate and whatever. But like in my experience, it's just I couldn't give that bandwidth to it. And it wasn't top of mind. I wanted to focus on myself. But other people chose the route of getting married in their early 20s and having kids, and then maybe they're flipping it and doing school after. It's a different timeline, but I do think that you in order to have a relationship succeed, you do have to be able to put in effort for it. And on top of school, it's just a big stressor, especially when you're figuring everything out.
I wish I would have told myself talk about stressors. Graduating, going right into the workforce, starting down not only a new job, but a new career path, having to be at my best, which I've tried to function at a very high level my whole career. But in the beginning, when you don't even know how to load a teleprompter, which is 101 in the television news field, is you've got to be able to rip and tear copy. We don't rip and tear copy anymore. It's all automated. But back then, and taping together teleprompter and running, you just have to function at such a high level on deadlines all the time that trying to do both things under pressure, you're going to be under pressure for your career, to make sure you're shining in your career. And then you're going to be under pressure either internally or externally to launch into a forever relationship. It's too much. It's just too much.
It is too much. And I think just something that I just thought of as you said about that is being in a relationship is like, honestly, I have a little control over it by putting myself out there and being open. That's my control. But it's the one thing in my life that I really don't have 100% control over because I can't force somebody to like me. And I think that's the biggest thing that I've realized that. And I'm like, that's why I struggle with this so much, is because I can control everything else in my life. I can control school. I can control job. I can control
when you go to bed, when you wake up.
I can control all of those aspects in my life. So I know the path I'm on. Like, that's why I went to school and I followed that path because it was clear to me. That's like, this is what you're doing. But the relationship stuff is so confusing because you just cannot force that. And you can't be like, okay, I'm ready for this. Love me. It's time. Like, you just can't control it. And everybody, like I said, everyone's on their own timeline. And I've been in situations where I've kind of, once I started to think, like after college, when I had my panic attacks, like, okay, what's next? I don't know. ? Time for a relationship? I don't know. And I've been kind of wanting to be more open to it. And I've been in quote unquote situationships. And I think that they've been on the other side of like, I like you, but I can't give you the energy because I'm too focused on trying to figure my own life out. And I just think that now, like, as we're having that conversation, I can relate to that because I do see it. Like, I was really heavily focused on it at 20 years old. So I understand that. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. You just have to accept your timeline and realize that it may not be super structured.
Well, here's how much pressure I felt. And looking back, I think, why was that happening? I think back in the day, there was a lot of cultural pressure.
Right.
There was a lot of community pressure. There was a lot of parental pressure. There was a lot of the questions of who you dating. Are you dating somebody? And I was always trying to check that box. And so what ended up happening is the man that I was in the relationship with through college, things were falling apart. I was sensing it wasn't going to be a forever deal. And I'd been with them for a couple of years. I started seeing somebody else before I officially broke it off with this man I'd been seeing. I would tell my younger self, don't ever do that again. Yeah. Don't ever do that. Don't break somebody's heart twice.
Yeah.
Not only that you're going to get out of the relationship, but also, by the way, I've already found somebody else. I would have that. I'm ashamed of doing that. And I would have, looking back on that, I wish I would have known how guilty and sad I would have felt looking back my whole life on that. I would have handled it much differently because the man I was with, we had a really good relationship for a lot of years and he was good to me. We just didn't have like I said, the lifelong connection that in the moment I felt the pressure to find. And I met somebody else and eventually I got engaged to this person. So, here's a light bulb moment for you. I've been engaged before I got married, which I got married in 1995. So I was engaged in the very early 90s. We'd set a date for, I think it was March of 91. We were supposed to be married and I called it off.
Wow.
I called it off. Again, starting yet another job. I'd moved to Salt Lake City, Utah by then, was working a lot of hours at a local news station as a television news reporter, a young reporter, a rookie reporter, constantly traveling, constantly trying to prove myself, constantly working stories, taking all the shifts, taking all the on-call shifts. There I was again, the pressure of, a new job, trying to plan a wedding.
Yeah, that's too much.
I about buckled.
Yeah.
I about buckled. And, there was other things that came up with this relationship as well that, ultimately ended it. But again, I feel bad for him because what I should have done is, and I couldn't because I was too young to recognize it, is recognize the amount of pressure I was under with the other relationship, starting the new job, then to start another relationship, then try to plan a wedding because we had gotten engaged, and then move and then take a new job. Well, that had trouble written all over it,
right.
But I didn't recognize that.
Yeah, and it's easy not to when you're young. That's just something you have to accept, but you learn from every single one of those moments, which is, I think, very important. But I think was it a gut instinct that kind of made you call it off? Like you're just realizing wasn't going to work with your life at the time?
I'll tell you what ultimately had me call it off is he had told me he was going to move to Salt Lake City with me, and then that didn't happen. And then the closer the wedding ceremony was getting, the more concerned I got that we were going to be living a long distance.
Oh, so you were long distance while you were engaged.
And I was very concerned about that, right or wrong. That also hits another point on my list of things I wish I would have told my younger self, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But that ultimately is what had me call it off. But I look at that and I think I wasn't ready.
Yeah.
I wasn't ready. That breakup goes under the pressure umbrella that I was feeling. And I put that in the category of so much pressure to get married and I was putting a lot of that on myself at this point. I think once you become an adult, you can only blame so much on other factors. I had made that decision to say yes. I had made that decision to indicate that I was willing to walk down the aisle into his arms. But at the end of the day, things did not work out. And I put that pretty much under, I was feeling so much pressure. I made some kind of foolish decisions along the way. And what I should have done, and I wish I would have done, and this is what I do now when a breakup happens, you got to give it time.
Yep.
You don't have to give it time for any other reason than yourself.
Yep. You have to process and heal, but also understand where you are and what you want.
So my new rule, and this happened after I broke up with yet another guy back in my 20s, is a 1-year waiting period now. So I started that. I don't have to go back and tell my younger self that because I started that in my 20s, a 1-year waiting period after a serious relationship. I'm like, if you're just dating around.
Until you start dating again. Yeah, no, I think that's a really good rule because you can jump to relationships very fast because immediately you're wanting to fill that void of a breakup afterwards. And I think a lot of people do that, but it can become messy. It probably can help you get over the other person, but if you haven't felt the feelings and figured it out for yourself in your brain, you're just going to end up feeling that eventually, like going back and processing those feelings, but you could be in the middle of another relationship and you may be realizing, oh, I'm not ready for this either, and stuff like that. So I've seen a lot of people do that, and I kind of wonder how, like just people my age and whatnot, going very quickly from serious relationship to a new one where I'm just like, that was an interesting shift. And then I see things blow up afterwards.
Too much.
But when you're young, you just don't know. You know?
Well, when you're young, this is at least how I felt. You feel like time is short.
Yeah. And I still feel like time is short. I'm 29. I guess I'm in kind of the young category, but getting older. But yeah, time feels like, I feel like that's like the number one thing in every girl's life is like, oh, you have to get married. And it's just imprinted in your brain, but you don't have to. You can be single for the rest of your life and you can be just fine. If you want kids and you want that family life, yeah, obviously, but there is a big pressure from when you're a kid that that's what you do when you grow up. You get married.
Yeah, so. When you said that, I remember when we were kids in the neighborhood, we would all play pretend wedding. Yeah. You're right.
And every girl has a Pinterest board with their wedding dress and I do, at least I just of like the themes of my wedding. I have it planned. I know what ring I would like. I know what dress. But a lot of people so many people have this, but I just like looking at it, I guess. And I've gone to a lot of weddings because I filmed a lot of weddings. So it makes me think
you do that on the side, right?
Yeah.
So talk about that a little bit more. How has that played into things you do a lot of videography for weddings and you've done that over the years as a business.
Yeah.
And you're very successful at it, and you film beautiful weddings and you do beautiful editing. I've seen several of your videos. They're mesmerizing. They're beautiful, Caitlyn. But how has that played into things that you recognize things are going on or a dynamic is happening at a ceremony or leading up to the ceremony? What lessons have you taken away from those?
Well, a lot probably. And I'm on a little bit of a hiatus for wedding videos because they are very stressful and I've needed a break. But
so don't call Caitlyn and ask her to film your daughter's wedding.
Notice, I'm just burnt out.
But you do a great job. You do a great job.
And that's why I always go back and say yes. But
is there anything that you've taken away?
Every wedding is different. And then I filmed some very close friends' weddings, and I filmed some people that I've just known from high school and whatnot. And so it's like, I've known these guys for a long time. I know they're going to get married. But one thing is I actually can feel a vibe where I think that these guys aren't as genuine and they end up getting divorced after.
Oh, you can
it's
tell
just
that.
a vibe. I don't know. But then there's been some where I did not expect it all and they've not ended up working out. But I've filmed weddings where they get married after just a few months. And those are more likely strangers. But
strangers, they meet, they fall in love, and they're married within months?
Within a couple months. It's a common thing in Utah. But just overall, I've seen that. I don't know how their relationships works out. They're probably extremely happy.
Maybe.
But who knows? But I just think that the idea of what I've learned from filming wedding videos is the day of the wedding is a very special day, but it is so busy and so jam-packed for the bride and the groom that they don't even remember a lot of it, which is why my job becomes important so they can look back on it. But I feel like some people are really just hooked on the idea of a wedding day and the event that's what they're reaching for. Not everyone. Like, you want to go for the relationship, but if you just want to get the wedding, because I think that every girl wants to walk down the aisle in their dress and whatnot, but the day gets so chaotic, I think just take it slow. And I'm honestly for eloping now because of all the stress.
Really?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I could see it just because so much money goes into some of these. Take the time for yourself, go on a nice trip and invite your immediate family if you want. And I think it's great. And then celebrate after with your friends. But I do see dynamics and vibes where I know some people have rushed into them and those ones don't always work out. Sometimes they do.
Well, this is interesting because one of the things on my list of things I wish I would have told my younger self, and you curiously just hit on it a moment ago because I haven't shared this with you, this list of mine yet, but take at least a year and a half to 2 years for dating, and I would even say maybe even longer with an engagement.
I agree
so
with
more
that.
than 2 years between dating and an engagement, and really get to know who you're dating, who their family is. And I also would have told my younger self, and I'm sure my ex would have said the same thing. We should all be realizing that when you marry the family.
Yep.
You marry the family. And so this is probably some of the dynamic that you're seeing at weddings. When the bride might not get along with the mother-in-law.
Yeah, it's just a vibe. You can tell sometimes. And it's most of the weddings I've been to are very genuine and everybody's, already family and stuff. But I have seen some instances where it seems kind of like on edge a little bit. But yeah, I think that that's a great point. And I've always thought that to myself. Like, I would want to be with someone for at least 3 years before I marry them, which I don't think the number matters exactly. It's just about how much you know someone and how many experiences you've gone through and you've opened yourself up to the family. And that number, I feel like I have to settle because it gets shorter and shorter because I'm like, well, I'm almost 30 now. So 3 years would be like 33, then I would want to get now that I'm putting myself, you can't extend that for too much.
So it's a new set of pressures.
Yeah, well, that's just what I told myself when I was younger. I don't have to follow it, but it's just, I just think you really have to know, honestly, you have to know yourself before, well enough before you really start to get to know and let somebody else in, because you need to know if it works for you instead of just letting somebody else kind of run your life and do those sorts of things. But there's so many things that people can keep hidden in a relationship early on, especially. And I don't know, just as I've heard this thing where you want to be with somebody through all seasons because different things happen through all seasons.
I agree with you.
Like holidays with families. And
you don't know what's going to happen. If you don't go
Yeah.
through Thanksgiving, Christmas, and maybe even New Year's with somebody, you have no idea what their family pressures are going to be like.
And you can, in the summer might be a great time for a summer fling situationship because it's summer, it's free
and
time, you're having
happy.
fun, everything's as wild and free. And then the winter months come and things get dark and cold, and you know, you want to know if you can be with someone through the good times and when things get bad, and that they're not just going to run away and kick you to the side when things get bad, because life is hard and trauma happens and bad things happen. You just have to know that you can fight through it, and it takes time to learn that.
There was a man I dated many years ago before I was married, and he had depression, and it became particularly unmanageable for him in the winter. And it was good that I went through all of the seasons with him. He broke up with me. So I'm just going to say that wasn't the reason. You know, I didn't leave him because of that. But for me to see that and know going in, oh, this is going to be something that we are going to have to address together. It becomes particularly difficult in the winter when there's just typically in Utah, there's not as many outdoorsy activities, and he could ski and all those things, but there's just not as much. I mean, we could just go, you know, anywhere in the summer. It really affected him.
Yeah.
And that was really good for me to see. You can also see this, like, what's your spending habits around the holidays? You know, mine might be off the charts. His might not be. There's maybe he's expected to buy a gift for every single family member, and that the family hasn't figured out what a gift exchange is. And so now you're stuck spending thousands and thousands of dollars on Christmas, and that's not your vibe. I can think of so many reasons why a year, at least a year, but I would say 2 years or even longer together is so critical. This will be the one person in your life that you will spend the most time with. So if you're not on the same page with things like holidays and how money gets spent and, what the impact of the in-laws and outlaws is going to be on the relationship. If these things, where you're going to live, how he or she is going to follow you if your career takes off and you have to move to a totally different state or country, are they going to be all in on that? Yeah. You can't figure that out in 4 or 5 months and plan a wedding on top of that.
Those are conversations you do really have to have. You know, as soon as it starts to get serious, is like, you know, what are your outlooks on, I don't know, your long-term goals? Like, even like religion, if we have kids, what kind of, you know, how does that work in our family? Like, what are your priorities with that? And I just think I've learned really just over the last year, kind of over the last 10 years has been kind of traumatic for me, but I had a really hard year last year where a lot of things just were opened up. And it's hard for me to, I'm getting emotional talking about this, but it's hard for me to connect with,
go ahead.
To connect with people who...
It's okay to cry, Caitlyn.
I know, but I'm the one who's like, cry because it's good for the content. But when I do it, it's not good. But it's just hard for me to connect with people who don't understand the trauma that I've been through, specifically.
Yeah.
And so I always run back to home in that way. And so I think that's just one example of like going through the fire with people. And so if they don't understand that, it's really hard to connect. And if they're not open to understanding it, it won't last at all. So
we're going to have to bring in somebody who can help us address that.
Well, I'll be crying through that episode, but I'm aware of it though. And
you've been through a lot.
And I know that it's a point like as well, like I think that it kind of makes me a red flag sometimes because I am like, oh, I'm traumatized. I don't want to bring you into this because it's a lot to carry, but it's just something that I'm aware of and I work on it. So,
well, you're such a awesome soul. Like you have the biggest heart. And when we go through horrible situations, it's hard not to want to lean on somebody and go through it alone. Mm-hmm. And when you have somebody in your life, or you're trying to bring somebody in your life who has no idea what you're talking about or cannot relate in any single way.
Or they tell you how to grieve is an example. Yeah. So, but it's just, that kind of caught me off guard there. But
yeah. Well, cry it out, girl. Cry it out.
It's okay to cry. Normally I feel nothing because I'm dead inside and I try to dissociate with those things, but it got me today.
This is why they invented Target parking lots, because you do not, I mean, how many times I've been through things where I just pull into a parking lot and I just let it all out.
It sneaks up on you out of nowhere, which that one I just wasn't expecting it to, but it's okay. But that's the vulnerability that you have to be able to express in a relationship, and you can't be discounted for it. And I think some people just, if you haven't experienced some traumatic things, like it may be harder for you to understand it. That doesn't mean it won't work out. You just have to be able to be open to going through dark times with somebody and good times. Just, you have to know the person.
Yeah.
So,
you have to be open to them and letting them grieve, because we are all bringing people into our lives anew. You know, if we're dating, it's a new person, and they're going to come into your life with stuff, you know, and heaviness and sadness and, you know, maybe some joy to share, hopefully too. But we're all, when you look at it like that, Caitlyn, maybe that does make it a little bit more manageable for you to recognize that we're all meeting each other for the first time, and nobody has lived a perfectly, you know, amazing life where nothing bad has happened.
Yeah, you have to be open and be willing to understand and not discount it. And I think that it's just very important. So I think I connect with people who have been through some life a lot more, because it's just, I don't know, having deep conversations is important to me.
Yeah.
So
right. Is there anything that you wanted to touch on that you would have told your younger self?
I have a few notes.
Go for it.
I wasn't even planning on bringing that up. It just kind of naturally happened. But one thing is, as I mentioned earlier, that I've been in a couple like situationships, which are basically like just a relationship that doesn't have a definite, like a label. And it's just everything else that you would be doing, but you just don't get to call them your boyfriend or significant other.
And post them on social media as your boyfriend?
Yeah. So like I've never been, quote unquote, promoted to girlfriend status in my life. But I've been in multiple situations. Well, and other than like
you are a catch.
Junior high.
You're a catch.
With the one person that I broke up with because I didn't want to be in a relationship in 8th grade.
So this just goes to that's happening in the with women in our 50s. We're doing that. We're getting the same kind of. This is men, not. Yeah, this is. We'll talk about that. I mean, I just feel like that's you should be. Somebody would be lucky to have you as their girlfriend.
They totally
You're an amazing.
Would be. They totally would be. I know that.
Yeah, good.
But part of it is like, you know, so I just say I've never been promoted to girlfriend, but I'm wifey material.
How about this? You've never promoted a man to boyfriend.
That's true. And
how about that?
The pressure of that is the man is supposed to be the one who does it. I think like it doesn't have to be that way, but that's just like, oh, I'm waiting for him to do these things. And I think that's kind of why I've gotten a little discouraged, is because it's like, oh, I'm just like, I've never been good enough to be the girlfriend. I've gotten past this now. But when I was like maybe 20, 22, kind of in that phase of just like experiencing this for like a couple times, it's just like, oh, that's just what it is. I'm just here when they want. So, which is sad, but I know a lot of people experience this now.
Would you have told yourself that's...
I would tell myself that just don't, like, have respect for yourself, number one, but don't give more energy than you're receiving. Like, you can give it at first, obviously, and fill these things out, but if you're doing it consistently and you're getting breadcrumbs, nothing. We'll get into what breadcrumbs mean, but if you're just not getting a lot back, like, have a conversation and or move on. That's just a very big learning lesson.
So cut it off sooner. Don't get trapped in the situation.
I can still learn from that lesson, but I have learned.
Sure.
I've learned to scale it back. If you're not receiving, you don't have to send that text and reach out. But, you know, like I said, kind of traumatized, so I like to check on people. That's just
wisdom.
Yeah.
That's wisdom.
Yeah. And then it kind of goes along with this a little bit, but the let them rule, it just means let them show you who you are, they are.
Yeah.
Sorry. And it just, like, let them do that. If they want to go, you know, cheat on you with this person, let them. Like, what are you going to do? Just let them be who they're going to be, because they'll come crawling back, and you shouldn't take them back.
Yeah, they're not a 2-year-old. You can't put them in a room and expect them, you know, to play all day with blocks.
Yeah, you can't control them.
Yeah, they're men. They're going to wander off. If they're going to wander off, they're going to do it, and you can't watch them 24/7.
And you can let them wander off. Let them be a free spirit if you want, like, and maybe they'll invite you along with you.
But then dump them if they do that.
Well, if it's in a negative, if they're doing something where it's not serving you or they're disrespecting you.
Sounds like cheating on you.
Cheating's
super
an
negative.
Example. I'm also just referring, like, if, you know, they want to go travel the world, let them, whatever. You don't have to keep them here for you.
Then
that type of stuff.
Then if they did that and they didn't invite you, you get to weigh on, like, was that where I want to stand in their life? Is not getting invited on
these
exotic
are just
trips
a
to
few
Paris.
Examples, but just
I like that.
Let them. And I just every time I'm trying to, like, control a situation or just be like, why are you not just doing what I need you to do? Just let them, and then let them go.
And then you get to decide if that works for you.
That's how you take back your power and your control. And then just something kind of going along with that as well is you can't love someone enough into, like, changing them. You can't love someone enough to change them. Like, there's no amount of love that's going to fix them and do that. You can support them and be there for them, but you loving them more and you draining energy from yourself is not going to just make them be fixed in the exact person you need them to be. It might just mean they're not your person. It doesn't mean they're a bad person in any way. If you guys just aren't aligning and it's not working, it just either is the wrong time or it's the wrong person.
How I look at that is when it becomes a point in the relationship when there are far more bad days than there are ever good days, and I'm spending way too much time crying it out in the Target parking lot. It's not my thing anymore, and I have to be better about recognizing that. I love that.
Yeah,
you know,
these are things I have to tell myself
advice
all the time, and I just think that at the end of the day, and obviously, if someone is willing to work with you, if you're having trials, but they're willing to work with you, that's a different story. But if you're just hitting roadblocks, you just have to accept the roadblocks, and you can't force it. You can't just hit down a wall and keep carving it out because it's just not meant to be, or they need to heal, or you need to heal. Something has to happen there. And so these are big learning lessons for me. And at the end of the day, I had this epiphany probably a few years ago that either I can keep putting energy into this situation, trying to fix it and trying to worry about it, or I can put this energy into myself and worry about myself and work on building myself. Either way, the outcome will be the same if they decide to come back. Whether I'm putting energy into them and stressing about it, or I'm putting the energy into myself, if they come back, it'll happen either way. So I just have to release the plan that I want for it and trying to control the situation and let them come back if they choose to. Don't put false hope on that. But if they're going to, they will.
Well, thank you for sharing your wisdom.
Yeah.
That's a lot of wisdom.
These are just mental notes that I still have to learn by, but it helps.
I think if we all had to live a life over again, there was definitely a long list of things that we tell our younger self to do and not to do.
Yeah.
And we probably just touched on a few. Mm-hmm. There's probably a lot more, but we were where we were when we were there, and we did the best we could. And the wisdom 10 or 20 or 30 years later is awesome. Yeah. But we still got a lot of life ahead of us. So we can use all of these tools and ideas and concepts to better our future life and our relationships, which is awesome.
Yeah, and all the trials, they just turn into learning lessons, and we've got a whole lot more to learn.